Hello, you are watching Middle East Matters on France 24. I'm Nadia Massi in Paris. In the show this week, as the Iran-Israel-US-Lebanon war is making headlines all around the world, what is happening in the occupied West Bank? Expropriation of Palestinian land, settler attacks, killings. That has long been the story of the West Bank, but human rights campaigners and experts say amid the fog of regional war, those attacks are on the rise and settlers are emboldened. My colleague Olivia Buzot travelled for us to the village of Kusra, that's 40 kilometres north of Nablus in the West Bank, and she filmed this report.
The chants echoing through the streets are for 28-year-old Amir Moatasem Adir. He's the latest name added to a grim and accelerating tally, the 6th Palestinian shot dead by Israeli settlers since the start of March alone. It's the scene playing out across the West Bank as illegal outposts multiply across Palestinian land.
Every day, every single minute, there is another attack on our homes, our people, even our olive trees. A heavy cloud of grief has settled over us. Every time someone else is killed, I can't help but think of my own father and brother.
Mohammed lost his own father and brother to settler violence in 2016, a tragedy that made today's funeral too much for his mother to bear. She stayed home, overwhelmed by grief that has spanned a decade.
This has opened up a deep wound for us. Since Amir was killed, I haven't stopped crying. The violence is escalating. Everywhere you look, the settlers are running wild.
Mohammed has filmed videos which he says show settlers operating in direct coordination with the Israeli military and police.
Look at them. The settlers and the police are positioned together at the junction. The police are right there in their car watching as the settlers open fire on people.
With convictions for these attacks almost non-existent, many families have lost faith in the justice system.
Courts never punish the people who kill us. Cases are closed without results. Take the young man who was killed. His family refused an autopsy or removing the bullet because they feel it's all for nothing. We know they will never imprison a settler, so the family decided to bury the martyr with dignity.
Rights groups warn this violence is reaching a breaking point, spilling from rural hills into major West Bank cities.
All of the residential area inside the West Bank are already being attacked by and raided constantly by the Israeli military and settlers attacks, which is completely new phenomenon on those cities. So everyone is focusing on what's going on with Iran-Israel-America war, and no one pays real attention. No one really cares what's going on in the West Bank nor in Gaza.
The UN says this violence has forcibly displaced more than 36,000 Palestinians in the West Bank in the past year.
Well, I'm pleased to welcome to the programme now Michael Sfard. He's an Israeli human rights lawyer and the author of The Wall and the Gate, Israel-Palestine and the Legal Battle for Human Rights. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. Hello to you and thanks for speaking to France 24.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me and for dealing with this very important topic.
I'd like your reflections, first of all, if I may, on this particular geopolitical moment, the war in Iran, and the ripple effects it may be having now in the West Bank. Are settlers emboldened at the moment? Are they stepping up attacks as the regional war rages?
Absolutely, and very much so. And it's a process that began with the war in Gaza. So under the din of war for the last almost 2.5 years now, the settlers have been exploiting the fact that the international community is focused on other issues and accelerated their violence and made it much more intensive and much more lethal in the West Bank. And what we're seeing in the West Bank in the last, definitely since the beginning of the war on with Iran, is a spiraling intensity of violence all directed at displacing Palestinian communities and ethnically cleansing rural West Bank. And in fact, they are succeeding because many of those very small and very poor and weak communities are experiencing attacks Ku Klux Klan style, with raids at night, setting fire to their homes, beating them, and there were at least 6 killings, 6 murders in the last couple of weeks by settlers against Palestinians.
And you use the phrase there, ethnic cleansing. And before we go on, I'd like to play you a soundbite from the UN Office of Human Rights, which is looking at the potential role that the Israeli military is playing in all of this. Take a listen.
Settler violence continued in a coordinated, strategic, and largely unchallenged manner, with Israeli authorities playing the central role in directing, participating in, or enabling this conduct. Long-standing and pervasive impunity is facilitating and encouraging violence against and harassment of Palestinians.
And Mr. Sfard, I wonder, what you make of what the United Nations is saying there, the suggestion being that the Israeli army is complicit in the settler violence you were talking about, that they turn a blind eye to settler attacks, that settlers are effectively having de facto immunity when they do target Palestinians. As a lawyer, do you think that's true?
Not only as a lawyer, as someone who has been for 3 decades involved in trying to get accountability for settler attacks against my Palestinian clients, I can say with utmost certainty, we are seeing a near total impunity for violent settlers. We're seeing support by the government, both in resources, in finance, in providing, allocating lands, and creating these areas, hubs of violence. And we're also seeing, in some instances, direct participation of soldiers through the regional brigades in the violence. So I definitely subscribe to what we just heard, and I would say that today we need to look at settler violence in the West Bank as state violence, state-sponsored violence. The settlers and the army and the other Israeli authorities are dividing the job between themselves, but eventually they all drive reality into one direction, to push the Palestinian society, the Palestinian population into their urban build-up enclaves, closing them down, and making sure that the Palestinian presence in South Mount Hebron, in the Jordan Valley, in the Jerusalem envelope, in the open areas of the West Bank will be diminished and replaced by Jewish presence. And this is a work that is done in collaboration. And yes, impunity, support, and direct participation are all parts of it, with a massive political backing by the current government, who is the most radical, racist government Israel has ever had.
You lay out in such a damning way there the intersection between the settlers, the state, this particular Israeli government. How do Palestinians fight that, resist that? And what role do Israelis like yourself, lawyers, play?
Well, we have less and less tools because, things that worked 10 years ago, court litigation, court cases are actually are impotent at the moment. I have cases in which I won and got injunctions, and those injunctions are not carried out by the Israeli police and the army for all kinds of excuses. So what we're seeing on the ground is a growing trend of very courageous Israeli activists who go to the Palestinian villages and Palestinian communities and engage in what we call protective presence, just by being there. Activists, Jewish Israeli activists, being there with the community, staying overnight, making sure that when gangs of settlers will come, there are Israelis around that could, call whoever you can call and also attract media attention. But the thing is that if the international community will not step in, if European governments who are allies of the State of Israel would not make it a major issue in the diplomatic exchanges with Israel, I'm afraid this trend will continue, because at the moment they're getting away with it. They're actually getting to dominate more and more land and to displace more and more communities.
Yeah, I hear loud and clear what you're saying, but we were struck in the newsroom and by struck me an unusual clip, a video clip from the military chief of staff of the Israeli army last week, Eyal Zamir, criticism, it seems, of settlers. Again, let's play you that clip.
It is unacceptable that during a multi-front war, the IDF is forced to confront a threatening minority from within. Anyone who believes these actions contribute to security is mistaken. They are morally and ethically unacceptable and cause extraordinary strategic damage to the efforts of the IDF.
So the military chief of staff there talking about the threat from a minority within. It's not just him. Even more explicit, we have Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister. He's condemned this week attacks by settlers, calling them, and I quote, violent gangs and Jewish extremists. What do you make of the fact that we're seeing this kind of criticism from very mainstream Israeli figures?
Well, the chief of staff is not an external spectator. He's not a commentator. He is someone that is controlling the situation. And if he would put enough energy and resources, and if he would be creating the commander's spirit, saying to his subordinates, this is really unacceptable. If they would think, if the regional brigade commanders would think that their tenure would be judged also according to how well they have supplied protection to Palestinian residents in their region, then we would see something completely different. It's not that the Israeli authorities, the Israeli law enforcement authorities, are not able or capable of protecting those communities. At the end of the day, those who are raiding them are in small numbers and not that mighty. So I have to say that it sounds to me like these statements are made for the purpose of masquerading what is really happening, and to present the international community, the international media, and to some elements domestically that that they're not accepting this. But they're not doing anything to stop it.
Just a final question for you. Unfortunately, we don't have lots of time left. I wonder what you make of big picture the Israeli strategy now in the West Bank in the wake of what's happened in Gaza. There are activists who say they're trying to mimic what they did in Gaza in the West Bank, displacing Palestinians from areas, places like Jenin, for example, and make it de facto unlivable to have a kind of Palestinian contiguous territory there. Do you buy that argument that we're looking at a kind of Gazification now of the West Bank?
I know what I can say is that there are elements within the current governing coalition that definitely want to mimic the Gaza strategy to the West Bank. We heard Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich several times in the last couple of weeks saying that the next government of Israel will have the task of making sure that as many Palestinians from the West Bank would leave the West Bank. He, of course, called it, with the euphemism, voluntary immigration, but in fact, it's driving people out. So we have very powerful elements within the government that definitely are engaging and almost explicitly in a policy of ethnically cleansing the whole West Bank. So I think there are others who have different views. So I don't think there is one solid policy when it comes to the West Bank. But all of them, even those who are more moderate, definitely engage and support the idea of uprooting Palestinians from the rural areas, from the Jordan Valley and those areas that are sparsely populated.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, a war crime.
Michael Sfard, there's much more I'd like to ask you, but unfortunately we will have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. You've been listening to Michael Sfard there. He's an Israeli human rights lawyer. And with that, you have been watching Middle East Matters here on France 24.